Starting off today's show, we will do it the same way we start off every Tuesday edition of the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast, and that is going around the NFL with our top takeaways from week number 6 around the league, game to game. Hit the music. Let's do it. Thursday Night Football, Buccaneers beat the Eagles by a final score of 28-22. And look, good job by Tampa Bay. I said it last week about the Rams. It is never easy to go on the road on Thursday Night Football, especially when it's after week 3, week 4. When you're banged up as a football team, it's part of what makes the NFL the best sport, is even when you're playing the worst team, football is such a grind. Being on that field is such a war that players are going to get injured. And in January, at the end of the day, a lot of times the winners and champions are determined based on who's healthy. Tampa Bay got out of this game the best they could. I'm not impressed with the Eagles. I'm not really impressed with Nick Sirianni as a head coach. He needs to run the ball more. I feel like Eagle fans are already losing confidence in him. Still not 100% sure if Jalen Hurts is going to end up being the answer there in Philadelphia as well. Good job by the Buccaneers getting the win 28-22. Urban Meyer wins his first career NFL game as a head coach in London as the Jaguars beat the Dolphins by a final score of 23-20. And one thing I'll say, number one, Urban Meyer just doesn't deserve Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback, because as much as Urban Meyer has been really bad as a head coach, and he's been a walking distraction, he was good on Sunday against the Dolphins. I think he did a really good job setting up that game-winning field goal on the final snap before Wright's kick, so shout out to Urban there. But the Dolphins are a disgrace. I don't even think Tua Tagovailoa was really the main problem in this game. And I spoke about going in just how important this game was going to be for Miami, in the sense that their quarterback was under a lot of pressure. They needed Tua to step up and lead this team more than ever. He threw one bad pick. I don't think he played bad, but the coaching and the inconsistencies of the decision-making on the part of Brian Flores is what I thought ultimately cost the Miami Dolphins in this game. He goes for it on 4th and 1, fine, but he has his young quarterback out of the shotgun 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Malcolm Brown gets stuffed. The Jaguars take it down the field from there and win the game. Good job by Urban Meyer, but I'm so disappointed in the Dolphins. This is a team that I obviously expected to be much better, and after 2 really solid years, I thought, for Brian Flores to start his head coaching career in Miami, I feel like that fan base is about to flip on him quickly. The Chiefs go into Washington and beat the football team by a final score of 31-13. And a couple of thoughts on this one. I just think the Chiefs looked themselves in the mirror in the second half after playing, which, let's face it, was a terrible half of football in half number 1. They just looked themselves in the mirror and said, all right, enough is enough. This can't happen anymore. We are too good of a football team to be playing this badly. And they ended up beating Washington, really running them off of the field in the second half. Mahomes still is turning the ball over. And I think if Kansas City ultimately wants to get back to the promised land of the Super Bowl, one, their defense obviously has to play better, which I think it did play solid. I get it. It's against Taylor Heineke and the Washington football team. I don't think this is an appropriate game to measure the Chiefs, because the game in this situation was one they should have obviously won by a lot. The Chiefs are just a significantly better football team than Washington. They proved that in the second half. The football team's defense continues to be very disappointing. And after 1 year of Ron Rivera doing a really good job and turning around the culture and the image and what we thought were improved working environments with Washington, already it starts off. The Chiefs have now won 8 straight games against Washington, and I didn't love retiring Sean Taylor's number. We know the only reason why they did it, to make their organization look good after what has been a terrible week off the field for that Washington football team. They're in trouble. Their defense was overrated. Good job, Kansas City, finding a way to go in there and leave with the win. MetLife Stadium, the Rams 38, the Giants 11. The Giants are a disgrace, and I get it. Saquon Barkley, Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney got hurt in this game, and once he left, the Giants never really had a realistic chance in this one. But this game wasn't even close. Daniel Jones at home in his career has a record now of 4-18, and I think Daniel Jones is going to be a quarterback in the NFL for a very long time. He's going to be a good backup, but the Giants took him with the top 10 pick. Dave Gettleman also took Saquon Barkley with the number 2 overall pick when his team realistically had no chance of winning anything, and that is why I don't love ever drafting running backs in the first round. It cost the Giants, and they are just a team right now. Their defense isn't great, their offensive line isn't great, their quarterback isn't great, they've been injured all over the place, and I do think by season's end, the best move with Big Blue might just be to rebuild and blow it all up. Joe Judge, he's a decent coach, he's an alright coach, but his stick is getting old, and he doesn't seem like a guy that has proved enough to stay if you're going to fire Dave Gettleman, which needs to happen badly because, man, none of the moves he has really made so far has paid off and helped the Giants in a good way. They've been the worst team in the NFL, really, since they won that second Super Bowl in 2011. The Giants are too good of an organization to be this embarrassed. Good win for the Rams. I think they're still one of the 3 best teams in the NFL. Never really had trouble in this one. The Colts, they get back in the victory column. They beat the Houston Texans by a final score of 31-3. And Davis Mills, he played good in the game against the Patriots, but it was clear that in this one, the Colts defense just went to work, and this was a game the Colts needed to win. I understand the Titans won on Monday Night Football last night, and in terms of who is going to win the AFC South, that's a conversation we'll get into a little bit later, but this was the first time all season that the Indianapolis Colts actually looked like the team that I expected them to be in the preseason. Carson Wentz played great, hitting with Paris Campbell on the long touchdown. T.Y. Hilton is back, which is a great sign for the Colts. Their defense looked good. Look, this is a team that with Carson Wentz has looked better. He hasn't really been the problem, and if they could have just found a way to hold on and win that Monday night game against Baltimore, maybe we're having a totally different conversation when it comes to this Indianapolis Colts team, but they're going to be on the road next Sunday night in San Francisco. If they could just find a way to win that one, I'll be willing to legitimately put their name back in the playoff discussion, the AFC South discussion, but that's not going to be an easy game. This one against Houston, when you've struggled to win games, was the one they had to have. Luckily for the Colts, they did. A game that we're also going to get into a little bit later when we break down the AFC North. The Bengals, they go into Detroit and beat the Lions. Final score of 34-11. The Bengals have now won 7 consecutive games against the Detroit Lions. And even though the score says 34-11, the Lions really couldn't score points until late in the fourth quarter. After the game, we saw Dan Campbell call out Jared Goff and just say flat out, he needs to be better. And I totally understand. The Lions are a team that none of us really expected to be any good this year. They're a team historically that has had a lot of trouble being able to win football games, but at the same time, at least throughout the first couple weeks of the season, they were competitive, and I think Jared Goff is the kind of quarterback where, they were winning games in LA, and Sean McVay had enough of him. We saw last year that in a must-win playoff game against Seattle, he started John Wolford over Jared Goff. That told me all I need to know about the future of him with the Detroit Lions. They're paying him a lot of money. They're going to need a new quarterback by the time the season ends. But the Lions at 0-6, just when you think they have at least played competitive football and they're due for a win, something like this happens. We saw it a couple weeks ago against the Bears as well. And the Bengals are a really good team. I think their defense is underrated. Joe Burrow is playing like a star at quarterback, and they are a dangerous team going forward. The chemistry between Burrow and Chase is great. I still don't 100% trust Zach Taylor as a viable head coaching option in the NFL, but Joe Burrow is legit, and he's going to be able to win a lot of football games for the Bengals going forward as long as he's just hopefully able to stay healthy. The Packers, they go into Soldier Field and beat the Bears by a final score of 24-14. This moves their record to 5-1. The Bears are now 3-3. And look, I was impressed with Chicago. Especially their defense. I like the young kid, Khalil Herbert. They used that running back as well. But after time went on, it was just inevitable that in this situation, the Packers were the better team. Aaron Rodgers balled out. You guys know the clip I'm talking about, him saying, I own you, to all of the Chicago Bears fans. The Packers have now won 19 of their last 22 games against the Bears, so it really just tells you that Aaron Rodgers, he wasn't lying. He has played great football against the Bears over the last couple of years. And look, I've been impressed with the Packers. We know that this was a team that going into the regular season, it wasn't really going to matter what they did, even if they were able to find a way into the playoffs, just because they've been able to win regular season games over the past couple years. But what I've been impressed with is after they got punched in the mouth in week 1 against New Orleans, they've been back here just finding ways to win football games. It hasn't been easy. They've been in a lot of battles. They've been in a lot of close games, but still, no matter what the circumstances are, they're just finding ways to win football games, which is never easy. That is something Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers have really been doing since they both got to Green Bay. That's a nice job by the Packers. They are now 5-1. And even though Aaron Rodgers hasn't been playing the great MVP football he did last year, still the Packers are only a game back of home field advantage in the NFC. I know they play Arizona on a Thursday night in a couple weeks. That is going to be must-see TV. Can't wait for that one. Speaking of must-see TV, the game of the week for a lot of people going into week number 6 of the NFL season was the Baltimore Ravens hosting the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Ravens ended up getting the win 34-6. Lamar Jackson is now 9-0 in the month of October. He is the only quarterback since the 1970 merger with 5+ starts and 0 losses in that month. And we're going to get into this game a little bit later when we talk about the AFC North. But the Ravens are just a really good team right now. They are so hard to stop. We know that going into this game, the Chargers' offense was looking like that unstoppable force. Everyone was talking about Brandon Staley, and obviously, appropriately so, just how great of a start that he has had so far this season with the Chargers. But the Ravens just put their foot on the gas pedal from start to finish and were able to take control of this game, and were really impressive while doing it. Lamar Jackson is playing the best football of his career, which is hard to say when he's already won an MVP. He's already been able to win so many regular season games. But with Hollywood Brown stepping his game up and playing great football, along with the Ravens' offensive line, I feel like each week I watch it, it's improving, it's getting better. And Lamar is just playing so good. He's the kind of quarterback that even when your team is having an off night and getting their ass kicked, like the Ravens were during that Monday night game against the Colts, he's so good that he's going to be able to dig you out of a hole and just find a way to win football games. And I think he's just getting better as a passer, which is a great sign if you're a fan of the Ravens. Moving on to the next game, we will go to the final 1 o'clock game. This game was an overtime finish. The Vikings go into Carolina and beat the Panthers, final score of 34-28. After a 3-0 start, the Panthers have now faltered to 3-3. We are starting to see Sam Darnold just look like a much different quarterback without the presence of Christian McCaffrey. And look, good job by the Vikings. This was a team that going into the season, I was feeling pretty skeptical about. They had some 6-11 vibes to me. I did think that it was appropriate, and I still think it is, that by the time the season ends, they should move on from Mike Zimmer as a head coach. But still, their offense is really good. It's really resilient. And there were many times throughout this game where I was just thinking to myself, wow, the Vikings really just threw this game away when they had an opportunity to end it, being up by 8, their defense lets Carolina drive right down the field, but they were able to stay committed. They were able to stay focused. Having Dalvin Cook in the lineup is a huge difference maker, and the Vikings are able to find a way to get a big-time win over the Carolina Panthers, and now both of these teams have the same record at 3-3. The Vikings defense still has a lot to be desired for. So does their head coach. I'm not 100% sold on them as a playoff team just yet, But hey, they easily could have beat the Bengals in week 1. They really should have beaten the Arizona Cardinals in week 2 if their kicker could have made a 37-yard field goal. And I do think, considering the amount of talent they have on the offensive side of the ball, they're always a team that is going to have a chance to win any game they play, but they're just so up and down. I also feel like they're always going to be in contention to lose any game they play. Good job by Minnesota, though, going on the road to Carolina and winning. And the Panthers, as much as I love Matt Rule, as much as I love Sam Darnold, as much as I thought I loved this defense, the Panthers' offensive line is not a strength. And when you put pressure on Sam Darnold, he is the kind of quarterback that could fold and just make some costly mistakes. I do think when it comes to Carolina, they need to be careful, and they need Christian McCaffrey back more than ever. It's tough now after the 3-0 start for them, sitting at 3-3. Let's go to the 4 o'clock window. Good job by Arizona. They go into Cleveland and beat the Browns by a final score of 37-14. They are now 6-0 for the first time since 1974. And Kyler Murray is just playing phenomenal football. He is the kind of quarterback where it makes you say, wow, the decision by Steve Keim was well worth it when they decided to move on from Josh Rosen and take someone else with that number 1 overall pick only a year after drafting the guy that they thought was the QB of the future. And Arizona, I was impressed by really their culture. We saw in the playoffs last year, Cleveland going into Pittsburgh when their head coach, Kevin Stefanski, test positive for COVID, and they were able to build some momentum, build the culture, stick to the game plan, and win in Pittsburgh, a place where historically they never win. And in this situation, the Arizona Cardinals were able to do the same thing. Their offense has been so good, it has traveled. They have now beaten 2 of the premier teams on the road with the Rams and with the Browns, and it is a skill. It is always impressive for me to see a West Coast team like Arizona find a way to go on the road and win in a tough environment like Cleveland. Arizona is a squad that they've always had talent, but now it looks like they're committed. It looks like they're all on the same page, and even without Cliff Kingsbury, they're able to find a way to go into Cleveland and win. Really good job by Arizona. I have my concerns about the Browns. They're super banged up. They have a tough Thursday night game coming up this week at Denver, which we will get into later once again when we take a deep dive into the AFC North. The next 4 o'clock game, let's go to Mile High Stadium in Denver. And shout out to the Las Vegas Raiders, who find a way to beat the Broncos 34-24. The game wasn't even that close. And look, we know everything that has been surrounding this Las Vegas Raider team in recent days. With John Gruden stepping down, this was the first game for new interim head coach Rich Bisaccia, and he had his team ready to play. The Raiders started off 3-0. They were going into this game 3-2. Same thing with Denver, so you knew going in, the implications for this game were big. The loser wasn't going to be feeling particularly good about themselves, and the Raiders' offensive talent came to play. Derek Carr showed you that he is the better quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater, and he, with a little bit of protection against a very good Raiders defense, Broncos defense, shout out to the Raiders offensive line, he was able to hang in the pocket, make all of the right throws. Henry Ruggs is a guy that every time I watch him, he seems to be getting better and better, and that was a good job by the Raiders. That's a mentally tough win right there. I feel like not many teams in the NFL would have been able to find a way to win that game after everything the Raiders as a team has dealt with over the last couple days. Hunter Renfrow, phenomenal. They ran the ball a little bit. Kenyon Drake had a nice game. Max Crosby is an absolute menace and a difference maker, a game changer on the defensive side of the ball. That's a really good job by the Las Vegas Raiders. How about the Dallas Cowboys? They find a way to end their New England curse. This is another game we will be taking a deep dive into a little bit later in the show. But Dallas beats New England 35-29 in overtime. CD Lamb, the game-winning 35 touchdown reception. And I like what Dallas is doing. You feel like over the last couple weeks, They have just came to play. But what impressed me about them in this one is that in a situation where historically they don't always win, what has worried me about Dallas more than anything, despite their great start to the season, is I've seen Mike McCarthy just screw up so many games and so many big-time spots and just not really have his team ready to play and ready to execute. That is my one fear when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys. And in this game, he was fine. He was competent. I do trust Kellen Moore as a play caller and just the overall level of talent on this Dallas Cowboy team. It is super impressive. Trevon Diggs finds a way to get another interception. New England, it's a tough loss. I do think that it is an all right sign that you've played some of the best teams in the NFC, like Dallas and like Tampa, and you're still at least competitive. But at the same time, it is frustrating in the sense that you could have easily won either of those two games if a couple bounces go your way. This is the kind of game with Tom Brady we saw New England always just find a way to win. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. They're sitting at 2-4 in a tough AFC. Sunday Night Football, the Steelers find a way to beat the Seahawks in overtime as well. They end up getting the win in that one by a final score of 23-20. Chris Boswell kicks the game-winning 37-yard field goal in overtime. And my main takeaway from this one is, look, the game shouldn't have been this close. Geno Smith with a journeyman running back in Alex Collins. Seattle's defense is not very good, and they still almost found a way to win. Pete Carroll will always have his team with Russell Wilson, without Russell Wilson, in a somewhat competitive spot. But the Steelers' defense did exactly what they had to do. Better late than never. They take over. TJ Watt is worth every penny, and we'll see what happens with the Steelers. They're now sitting at 3-3. They are still very much alive in the AFC playoff picture after being written for dead following their loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. Ben Roethlisberger just didn't screw up. I feel like at this point in his career, that's all what we could really ask from him. And the Steelers defense is just that good. Najee Harris looks like a very good player. We'll see what happens with Pittsburgh and Seattle. NFC West is tough. They are now at 2-4, 4 full games behind the Arizona Cardinals. And as good as Geno Smith could be, things aren't looking great. Of course, just when Geno gets put into the fold, Seattle is thrown 3 consecutive primetime games. They'll be home Monday Night Football next week against the Saints. That should be a good one watching Geno, but I think the Seahawks are in trouble. It might just be a transition year for them without Russ. And then finally, good job by the Titans, finding a way to beat the Buffalo Bills by a final score of 34-31. Derrick Henry, 130-plus rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in 2 consecutive games. And what made this game so good is that the 2 best players on the field were Derrick Henry and Josh Allen, and they were just throwing punches and punches and punches at each other. And I don't have any problem with Sean McDermott trying to win the game on that 4th and inches call. It's unfortunate with how it ended. Josh Allen slipped. The Titans defense, which has been much maligned over the past couple years, finally finds a way to make a play. And despite trailing for a big portion of the game, Tennessee finds a way to win. Ryan Tannehill, who hasn't been great so far this season, hangs in there. And Tennessee, even though they've lost to the Jets, even though they got blown out by Arizona, they're still sitting at 4-2 and now have the same record as Buffalo, which a lot of people consider to be the best team in the AFC. And now the top dog in the AFC record-wise, with a record of 5-1, is the Baltimore Ravens. Despite all of the injuries they've had, they are now record-wise the best team in the AFC. Buffalo, I'm not worried about them going forward. I was really impressed with what they were able to do against Kansas City. This was for the first time all season that their defense folded, but against a guy like Derrick Henry, that's just a tough dude to tackle. Really good job by Tennessee finding a way to win. That atmosphere, that crowd in Nashville was electric. One of the better football games I've watched this season. The primetime games always find a way to deliver. Really good job by Tennessee beating Buffalo 34-31, and that has been Around the NFL in week number 6.